We just adopted a philosophy that we were not going to lose to Google in the enterprise space. And if you were an account executive and you were on an account that lost to Google, you were fired.
What's the one person that you met and you were like, I'm going to knock that person off the face of this earth? Like a competitor, somebody who tried to put you under, could be anything. Like the one person when you think about during your career, you're like, I'm going to bury them. Do you have somebody like that in mind?
Well, the biggest competitive battle we ever got into, I mean, at Walmart, it was Kmart, 4 times our size.
Isn't that crazy? I used to shop at Kmart's. They're not even around anymore.
No, they were
if they
4 times bigger
than
Walmart at the time. And so we were, hand-to-hand combat fighting them. And I learned about how to compete in that exercise. And we eventually eclipsed them, and they're out of business.
Who is the K for Kmart? Was that a family name, or what was it? Was it owned by somebody else?
No, they were a public company. I don't know the origin of it, but they were a public company long before we were.
Wow.
Long before. The one at Microsoft that got pretty elevated and got for a while there was when Google did Google Apps and came out with sort of their own email and Excel and Word and all that stuff. And they began to say it was ready for enterprises. That was a huge threat to Microsoft, and we eventually crushed them. It's still used by individuals and some small business, but enterprises don't, as a general rule, do not use Google Apps. They use it, Exchange, Office 365, that kind of stuff. So we were in a hand-to-hand combat, and they had won a few accounts and had big press on that. And so we just adopted a philosophy that we were not going to lose to Google in the enterprise space. And if you were an account rep or an account executive and you were on an account that lost to Google, you were fired. It got that serious. And, we loved you. We can still be friends, but you can't work here anymore.
And is that because the philosophy was you were unable to sell the value proposition?
Yeah, and you just couldn't be asleep at the switch and let them creep into the account because it was going to erode the foundation of the company. When you take things to a point that you've got, it's life or death, so to speak, for a business, even a big business, because it would have taken a long time to erode Microsoft, but it would have been the start of an erosion of Microsoft had we lost the enterprise messaging space and the Excel, Word, PowerPoint, all that stuff.
I mean, you think about in your guys' business, losing to a competitor. You imagine saying, hey, if you don't secure that job, no matter who you are, if you lose to that competitor, because we know they should not be taking our business.
And the politically correct way to say it is that person has to re-interview for their job if they lose their job. So when you go back, I don't want to make sure we don't give you the wrong nomenclature. Go back. You don't say you're fired if you don't, this or that. You say, hey, if we lose one of these, you're going to have to re-interview for your job. You have to tell us why you're the person. Why are you good enough to keep doing what you're doing? If it's that important, and I can't speak for your business, I don't know all. I know this is a room full of a bunch of diverse businesses. Yeah. But some things, if you ever get a competitor that's really chipping away at your livelihood, it requires that level of sort of scrutiny and intensity that goes with it.
And imagine if today, theoretically, you're like, oh, I don't have that threat today. But how many of your people could stand up under that threat? So that's the thing you have to ask yourself, because maybe you don't have that threat today in your mind, but how much bigger, how much more bold, how much more successful could you be if your team had a readiness where they knew they needed to go win the marketplace every single day with the tools you gave them, and there's no excuses.